The world was quieter than it had ever been. Not peaceful, but hollow. In New York, the streets were half empty. Weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. Storefronts sat boarded and abandoned, their signs faded to ghosts. Along a wall in Times Square, hundreds of paper flyers fluttered in the wind. Faces of the missing, loved ones, who had turned to dust when the sky tore open and the universe halved. The hum of traffic was gone. The city that never slept had grown used to silence. The emptiness felt permanent, like a wound that refused to heal. At the Avengers compound, the quiet was heavier. The war room table, once a place of strategy, laughter, and arguments, now felt like a memorial. The survivors sat scattered around it, each looking older in ways that had nothing to do with age. Tony Stark hunched over a holographic display, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness and the weight of 5 years of failure. Doctor Strange stood at the far window, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze distant, as though still searching the countless possible futures in his mind. Spider-Man sat in a corner, knees drawn up, his mask on the table beside him. He looked younger than ever, the weight of war pressing down on his shoulders. And then there were the Power Rangers. Jason sat at the end of the table, the red power coin in front of him. It no longer glowed with the steady pulse of the morphin grid. Only faint flickers of light remained, as if the coin itself carried grief. Kimberly, seated beside him, absent-mindedly traced a finger along the edge of her pink morpher, her eyes distant. Zack leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Billy typed slowly at a Stark terminal, running calculations that had no end, and in the center of the table in a clear case lay the yellow power coin, Trini's coin, dark and lifeless. No one touched it. Nick Fury stood at the head of the table. His voice was the only thing in the room with energy. We've been fighting scraps for 5 years, raiding outposts, tracking lieutenants. We've hit every lead and come up empty. Until now. He tapped the console and a hologram flickered into the air. An unstable gamma radiation signature, spiking on a dead world across the galaxy. Strange's eyes narrowed. That's not natural. It's the stones. Or what's left of them, Fury said. Point is, it's the first real sign we've had of Thanos since Titan Prime went cold. Tony's voice was flat. And we think walking into whatever fortress he's holed up in is a good idea. Jason leaned forward, his voice carrying more heat than anyone had heard from him in years. We don't get to hesitate. He killed Trini. He killed half the universe. If this is the lead, we take it, no matter what's waiting for us on the other side. Spider-Man looked between them. And if we fail, Jason's eyes locked on his. Then we make sure he goes down with us. They prepared in silence. Billy and Tony worked side by side in the hangar, building a ship that could survive the journey through the unstable warp lanes. It was a strange hybrid, Stark armor plating fused with Zord engine cores. The cockpit ringed with Strange's warding runes to keep it anchored in normal space. In the armory, Jason inspected the power sword, running his thumb over the nicks in the blade from their last fight with Thanos. Kimberly sat on a bench across from him, re-stringing her bow for the 3rd time. Not because it needed it, but because it kept her hands from shaking. Zack tuned the power axe, the hum of its energy core filling the space with a low growl. In the quiet, their thoughts wandered back to Angel Grove, to battles fought in the sunlight when their enemies were loud and colorful and beatable. That was another lifetime. The morphin grid had given them a second chance after years of retirement, but it had also given them Trini's death. The next morning, the hangar doors opened, sunlight flooding across the ship's hull. The survivors stood together. The Rangers in full armor, the Avengers in battle gear. Strange traced the final glyph over the ship's nose, locking the protection spells in place. Fury stood at the base of the ramp, arms folded. "You bring him back dead or not at all?" Jason nodded once. "We'll bring back something." They filed aboard. The engines whined, a low hum building to a roar. Through the forward viewport, Earth fell away, replaced by the deep black of space and the cold light of distant stars. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Kimberly's voice came over the comms. "If this is the end, at least we're ending it together." Jason's hand tightened on the throttle. "It's morphin time." The ship cut through the void like a spear, its hull gleaming faintly in the light of distant suns. For hours, the crew sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jason remained in the pilot's seat, eyes locked on the nav display, guiding them along the safest warp lanes Strange had calculated. Kimberly stood near the viewport, watching stars smear into streaks as they entered another jump. Zach leaned against the wall, arms crossed, pretending to rest but glancing at the yellow power coins display on the console every few minutes. Billy hunched over his terminal, scanning for any sign of energy spikes that might betray their target's exact location. Across from him, Tony Stark sipped cold coffee and pretended he wasn't studying Billy's every calculation, quietly impressed by the Ranger's grasp of multi-dimensional engineering. Doctor Strange sat with his eyes closed, cross-legged in the corner, whispering incantations under his breath. It wasn't for show. He could feel the threads of fate tightening around them, and each vision he pulled from the void was darker than the last. Spider-Man kept pacing the narrow walkway, his usual chatter absent, hands fidgeting at his sides. He'd fought alongside the Rangers for 5 years, but the thought of going after Thanos again, this time without the same backup as before, was eating at him. Every creak of the ship felt like a countdown. The tension broke when Billy's console lit up. "I've got something," he said, his voice sharper than usual. "Gamma readings, stronger than before. If I'm right, it's not just the stones. There's a morphin grid signature mixed in." The room went still. Jason turned in his seat. How was that possible? Billy's fingers flew over the keys. If the gauntlet reformed itself, it might have drawn on residual energy from our last battle. Trini's coin was exposed to that blast. It's possible her grid energy fused with one of the stones. Kimberly's voice was barely above a whisper. "So, part of her is in there." Before Billy could answer, Strange's eyes snapped open. "Brace yourselves." The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring. Out of the darkness ahead, shapes emerged. Jagged, angular ships, black as obsidian, cutting across their path. The Chitauri fleet, larger and more advanced than in either New York invasion, moved into formation like a predator closing its jaws. Behind them, massive siege engines bristled with cannons, their designs unlike anything seen before. Zach stepped to the viewport. "Looks like he's been busy." Jason pulled the throttle back and switched the ship to combat mode. "Everyone to stations. Let's show them what 5 years of hell looks like." The hangar bay roared to life as the dinosaurs deployed, one by one. The red Tyrannosaurus Zord burst into the void, plasma cannons firing. The sleek blue Triceratops Zord rotated its massive drill horn, cutting through incoming missiles. Zach's Mastodon Zord clamped its tusks around a Chitauri cruiser, tearing it in half before releasing it to drift lifeless into space. Kimberly's Pterodactyl Zord spiraled through enemy squadrons, raining laser fire from its wings. Spider-Man swung out from the main ship, webbing onto an enemy craft in zero gravity and yanking its cockpit hatch open. "Not bad for a field trip," he shouted over comms, before webbing the pilot and hurling him into the vacuum. Tony's Mark L armor streaked past him, launching micro-missiles that curved around and detonated against a Chitauri battleship's hull. Strange appeared on the Zord hull in a shimmer of sparks, conjuring spinning shields to deflect incoming blasts, while hurling entire ships into dimensional rifts. But even with the onslaught, more ships kept coming. Jason's voice cut through the chaos. "We can't fight them all. Punch through to the surface." The Rangers formed up, their Zords locking into a combined attack pattern, clearing a path through the blockade. A final, coordinated barrage tore open the atmosphere, and the ship dove, flames licking at its hull as they descended toward Titan Prime. The planet's surface was a wasteland of jagged cliffs and fissures glowing with molten light. Black fortresses rose from the ground like teeth, their walls carved with alien glyphs. The landing zone was barely large enough for the ship, and the moment they touched down, the ground trembled. The cliffs erupted as outriders poured out in swarms, their shrieks echoing through the thin air. At their center marched the Black Order, Corvus Glaive, Proxima Midnight, and Cull Obsidian, each in new armor, weapons upgraded with what looked disturbingly like pieces of shattered Zord tech. Jason leapt from the ramp with the power sword drawn, the blade's edge glowing red hot in the dim light. Kimberly landed beside him, arrows already notched and sparking with energy. Zack's axe crackled with electricity as he spun it into ready position. Billy's lance unfolded to full length, glowing with lines of blue grid energy. Tony hovered overhead, Strange floated into place, and Spider-Man clung to a nearby ridge, ready to strike. The Black Order charged. Proxima's spear clashed with Jason's sword, the impact sending out a shockwave that cracked the ground. Kimberly fired a rapid volley at Cull Obsidian's armor joints, forcing him to stagger back as Zack rushed in with a crushing overhead swing. Billy met Corvus head-on, the clash of their weapons sending sparks in all directions. Overhead, Strange's crimson bands lashed around incoming outriders, hurling them into the molten fissures below. Minutes felt like hours. The battlefield became a blur of color and steel, every strike and counterstrike lit by the glow of grid energy and alien fire. Finally, a blast from Kimberly's bow caught Cull square in the chest, sending him tumbling into the molten abyss. Zack disarmed Proxima with a spinning strike, Jason driving his sword through her chest in the same motion. Corvus hissed and lunged at Billy, only for Strange to open a portal beneath him, sending him screaming into a collapsing dimension. The Rangers regrouped, breathing hard, armor scuffed and sparking. Jason wiped blood from his cheek where a crack in his visor had split. Ahead, the gates to the fortress loomed, massive and silent. The Gamma signature pulsed stronger than ever, resonating with the faint glow of Trini's coin inside the ship. Billy stepped forward, scanning the gates. He's here, and he knows we are too. Jason tightened his grip on the sword, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the gates. Then let's finish it. The gates to the fortress groaned open with a sound like the grinding of mountains. Beyond them, a vast hall stretched into darkness, its walls carved with alien symbols that pulsed faintly with the light of the Infinity Stones. At the far end, on a throne of jagged black stone, sat Thanos. He rose slowly as they entered, the gauntlet gleaming on his left hand, each stone burning with raw power. His armor was unscarred, his frame unshaken. It was as if the years since the snap had only made him stronger. "You've chased me across worlds," Thanos said, his voice low, resonating through the chamber. "You've lost friends, armies, hope, and yet you stand before me. I am impressed." His eyes flicked to the yellow power coin strapped to Jason's chest. "But you bring me something that belongs to me. Jason stepped forward, sword at his side. You took her from us. You took half the universe. This ends now. Thanos' smirk was faint. It ends, yes, but not for me. He raised the gauntlet, and the chamber erupted. The first blast from the Power Stone ripped through the air, forcing the Rangers to scatter. Jason rolled behind a column, shards of stone raining down around him. Kimberly sprinted low, loosing 3 arrows in quick succession. Each one detonated against the gauntlet, staggering Thanos just enough for Zack to charge in. His axe came down in a vertical arc, sparks sprang as it met the gauntlet's plating. Thanos caught the weapon in his free hand and with terrifying ease, wrenched it away before hurling Zack across the hall. Zack's black visor splintered on impact with the wall, cracks spreading like ice across the faceplate. Billy darted in next, lance spinning in a blur, striking at Thanos' legs to throw him off balance. The Titan's boot connected with Billy's chest, the force sending him skidding across the stone floor. His blue armor flared with warning sparks, one pauldron snapping free and clattering to the ground. Overhead, Strange conjured golden bands to restrain the gauntlet, Spider-Man swinging in to web Thanos' arm and anchor it to the wall. Tony blasted the Titan's flank with a concentrated repulsor beam. For a moment, it seemed to work. The gauntlet was pinned, the Titan forced to one knee. Jason seized the opening. Now! The Rangers converged. Kimberly's arrow punched into the gauntlet's housing, prying the Crimson Reality Stone loose. She caught it, the glow searing through her gloves, her pink armor instantly flaring brighter. Billy thrust his lance into the gauntlet's knuckle joint, tearing the blue space stone free. Zack roared and ripped the green time stone from its socket, the energy coursing through his armor in jagged streams. Jason, locking eyes with Thanos, wrenched the red power stone free with both hands, the surge nearly buckling his knees. And from Strange's swirling sigils, the golden soul stone floated into Jason's palm, its light mingling with the faint golden shimmer of Trini's power coin, her presence brushing across them all like a whisper. The gauntlet sparked violently, 4 of its sockets now empty. Thanos bellowed in fury, shoving Strange back with a surge of raw force that shattered the wizard's shield and hurled Spider-Man across the chamber. You think you can wield my destiny? He snarled. Jason's grip tightened on the sword. We're not wielding it. We're ending it. They formed a circle, each ranger holding their stone. The power radiated between them, arcs of light connecting armor to armor, binding them in a lattice of color: red, blue, black, pink, and gold. Their helmets cracked along the seams, the stone's heat bleeding into their bones. But none of them faltered. Thanos charged. Jason met him head on, the power sword ablaze with all their combined might. Kimberly fired arrows that struck like meteors, each hit blasting chunks from the Titan's armor. Zack's axe slammed into Thanos' ribs with a bone-shattering crack, Billy's lance piercing the gauntlet hand to pin it to the floor. The Titan staggered, for the first time truly struggling. The stone's energy climbed to a scream in their ears. The morphin grid itself surged, the floor glowing beneath their feet. Jason looked at each of them in turn, seeing the resolve in their eyes. For Trini, he said. They stepped in, pressing their stones together at the center of the circle. The light exploded outward in a blinding fusion of color. The gauntlet screamed as it shattered, molten gold streaming across the floor. The shockwave hit Thanos square in the chest, tearing him apart, molecule by molecule. His roar was swallowed by the light, his body dissolving into dust that scattered into the void. The power didn't stop. The stone's energy tore through their armor, blasting away the last of their visors. Their faces were bare now, battered, burned, but unafraid. They locked arms, holding each other upright against the onslaught. Kimberly's eyes glistened, but her mouth curved into the faintest smile. Zach's hand tightened on Jason's shoulder. Billy's lips moved in silent calculation, even now. Jason closed his eyes and let the light take him. Across the galaxy, the wave of energy rippled. On Earth, dusted Avengers reappeared mid-step, confusion giving way to joy. Families embraced, streets filled with tears and cheers. The universe had been restored. When the light faded on Titan Prime, the Rangers were gone. All that remained were their 5 power coins, dulled to lifeless gray, resting in the ashes where they had stood. The silence was heavy, almost reverent. Tony stepped forward, kneeling to pick up Jason's coin, his gloved hand trembling. Spider-Man stood beside him, eyes locked on the coins. His voice cracked. They saved us. Strange looked out over the horizon, where the last motes of the stone's power faded into the sky. No, they saved everything. Far above, the stars shimmered faintly, as if the morphin grid itself remembered its champions.